Okay. Hello, everyone. This is Rick Wychek, the director of NAEHS. I want to welcome you to the 161st meeting of the National Advisory Environmental Health Sciences Council. So this is my first council meeting as the permanent director of NAEHS. I'll have a few things to say about that during my director's presentation. But without further ado, I want to read the Sunshine Act, and then I'm going to turn things over to Pat. So, pursuant to the Government in the Sunshine Act, all aspects of this meeting are open to the public, except for the review, discussion, and evaluation of grant applications and related information, which we just conducted in the closed session about an hour ago. So again, welcome everyone. And without further ado, Pat, the floor is yours.
Okay, thanks, Rick, and welcome to everyone. I want to start by going around and introducing everyone here, starting with our council members and then the NAEHS senior leadership. For the since we're public, we did this a minute ago, but since we're now in a public meeting, I want everyone recognized. So I'm going to call your name, and I promise you this will go a little bit better than it did in the closed session. So, Andy, can you introduce yourself and your affiliation, please?
Sure. Andy Shi, Autism Speaks.
Thank you. And Brad?
Brad Reset, Washington University School of Medicine.
Thank you. Edith?
Edith Parker, Dean, the University of Iowa College of Public Health.
All right. And May? You're muted. May, you're muted. Can you unmute? Can I unmute?
Took me, you're muted. You need to unmute.
There you go.
May Ho, University of Arkansas for Medical Sciences Research and Innovation.
Thank you. Irva. There you are.
Okay, there we go. Irva Hertz-Pichetto, University of California, Davis.
Dr. White Newsom. And I'm not seeing her on, so maybe we'll come back to her. Dr. Cordero.
Hi, I'm Jose Cordero, the University of Georgia College of Public Health.
Okay, Dr. Vasquez.
Hello, Karen Vasquez, the University of Texas at Austin.
Thank you. Katrina.
Gina Korfmacher, University of Rochester.
Dr. Goldman.
Lynn Goldman, Dean of Public Health at George Washington University.
Dr. Perez Lugo.
Marla Perez Lugo, University of Puerto Rico, now visiting professor at Macalester College.
Dr. Song.
University of Texas Health, San Antonio.
Dr. Wright.
Bob Wright, Mount Sinai School of Medicine.
Dr. Tangway.
Robin Tangway, Oregon State University.
Dr. Kavanaugh.
Terry Kavanaugh, University of Washington, Department of Environmental and Occupational Health Sciences.
And Dr. Penning.
Trevor Penning from the University of Pennsylvania, Director of the Center of Excellence in Environmental Toxicology.
And then Dr. Geller.
Andrew Geller, U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, Office of Research and Development.
Dr. Fitzpatrick. Should we have her? And Dr. Ellison.
Good morning. Gary Ellison, National Cancer Institute, the Division of Cancer Control and Population Sciences.
All right, I'm going to circle back around. Dr. White Newsom, are you available?
Dr. White Newsom, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. George Washington, the Kresge Foundation.
Okay, thank you. And Dr. Fitzpatrick, are you available? All right. I want to start now with our senior leadership. You heard from Rick. I'm going to ask Gwen. Can you introduce yourself?
Good morning. Gwen Coleman, Acting Deputy Director, NAEHS.
And Daryl.
Yes, good morning. Daryl Zeldin, Scientific Director, NAEHS.
Brian, are you on?
I'm here, Pat. This is Brian Barrage. I'm the Scientific Director of the Division of the National Toxicology Program.
Thank you. And Jan, are you around? I am. Hi. Good morning, Janet Hall, Clinical Director, NIEHS. And I just saw Chris click in. Are you available?
Good morning. This is Chris Long, the Executive Officer for NAEHS.
And I am Pat Maston, the Acting Director of the Division of Extramural Research and Training. Thank you all for being here. I want to start with just a few housekeeping items. First is that since we're doing kind of a coast-to-coast meeting today, we're not going to do a lunch break as such. We'll take a break around 12:15 Eastern time. Those who are in the mode to eat can grab some lunch and bring it back, and we'll have a working lunch. Be back at 12:30. Make sure those numbers are right. Yep. And then in terms of Zoom etiquette, I would like to remind you that when you're not talking, please mute your microphone. And when we go on break, we also advise that you turn off your video and mute your microphone so that you don't have unintended conversations going out. The members of the public who want to express opinions related to views related to what we're talking about can do so by going to our council website, and there's a email address, national.advisory.council@niehs.nih.gov, where you can email your questions or concerns. We'll have one vote or two votes today for concepts. They'll be done electronically via council book like we've done before. So the next thing I would like to do is to have a consideration of our June 2020 minutes. And those are sent to you through the electronic council book. I need a motion from a member of council to approve the minutes.
So moved.
To approve.
And a second. Sounds like I have that. So if you could go on your electronic council book and record your votes, I will hold for a second. And Liz McNair, when you have all your votes, you can let me know and we'll proceed on. Has everybody voted, Liz?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay, there you are. I couldn't find your square again.
This is Trevor Penning. Are we supposed to vote on these minutes when we weren't part of the meeting?
No, Trevor and Karen, Dr. Penning, Dr. Vasquez, Dr. White Newsom, and Dr. Hertz-Pichota, you should not vote. Next time.
Dr. Kavanaugh, please vote.
One more time, please. Liz?
Dr. Kavanaugh, please vote.
Yeah, I'm having trouble. I'm having some trouble. I'm trying to get back on.
Okay. If you need another second, then I mean, if you can't get it done in the next second or so, we can do this by email after the meeting. It'll be fine. Just let me know how your progress is going. I will say one other thing, another housekeeping item as we're moving into the discussions of open session. We're asking that if you have something you want to say, you want to speak, that you use the electronic hand raising function on the Zoom. You get it by going to participants, and if you click by your name, there's a more button you can push, and I think that will raise your hand. If you don't get called on, you can add an item to the chat room saying I need to speak, and we'll be monitoring that. And again, if that doesn't work, just get my attention. Raise your hands, just start talking. We're more interested in having a good, thorough discussion than we are about being overly polite here. I would also ask that during the course of the meeting, since we have to do the virtual thing here, let's take advantage of the electronic tools here. Feel free to add any comments you have to the to the chat room, and we'll be collecting those at the end of the day. We have a science writer, Ernie Hood, who is taking notes during the meeting, but this will just kind of augment what he's doing. So, Terry, were you able to vote?
Yes.
Okay, so I think we have everything we need. Thank you. With that, I believe we've conducted all the preliminary business we need to do. I will now turn it over. I'm sorry, just to make sure everybody notes that in your council council material, we have a list of the future meetings, so please make note of that and make sure those get on your calendar. So now I'd like to move into the agenda items. The first one is an agenda item from the Division of Extramural Research and Training. It's a concept. We do these when we have new or continuing programs we like to bring to council to get your okay on. This one is kind of an unusual thing. It's a double concept, if you will. We'll let David Baushaw start off as explain this people, not projects update. David, it's all yours.
Thanks, Pat. John, if you can give me control. Okay. Good morning, everybody. So I'm David Baushaw, the Chief of the Exposure Response and Technology Branch, and it's my pleasure to lead a discussion today on two of our programs and involvement with a third on some efforts that we've had to kind of change the focus a little bit to focusing on people rather than projects, and really using some innovative programs and mechanisms to nurture and support some of our most outstanding environmental health researchers. So kind of to give an overview of what we're going to be talking about today, I'm just going to spend about 8 minutes talking about our engagement with the Common Fund High Risk, High Reward program. And then that'll lead into two separate presentations from Carol Schreffler and from Jenny Collins in my group, talking about the ONES program and the River program, giving a history and an update on those activities, and a kind of overview of our plans for both programs moving forward, and then formal discussion and motion for council consideration of those two concepts so we can continue those programs. So the Common Fund High Risk, High Reward program is actually one of the very first efforts that was supported through what was then called the NIH Roadmap for Biomedical Research when Dr. Zerhouni was the director of NIH. And this was an effort to kind of use some new mechanisms to support exceptionally creative scientists that are doing some really very exciting and very high potential for transformative impact on research across the breadth of NIH. So there are 4 programs that are solicited through the HRHR program. 3 of these are people-focused programs that kind of formed a model really for the River program and subsequently for ONES. And the first, which is the one that you're probably most familiar with, is the Pioneer Award, the DP1. So these go, they're not career stage specific, but most of the awardees for those have been fairly senior researchers with a long track record of doing an innovative and transformative research. And then that has been partnered with 2 kind of earlier stage investigator awards. The first is the New Innovator, which follows the traditional ESI definition. And then even earlier than that, the so-called Skip the Postdoc Award, the Early Independence Award, which is targeted to new PhDs, I think within 5 years of their degree, and ones that are in a position that is characterized as being non-independent. So they're not leading their own research group. And this is really getting them kickstarted early on in the program. And the HRHR program, as with all Common Fund programs, is overseen by a trans-NIH working group with representation from the institutes. And our representative on the HRHR program overall, the leadership group, is Jenny Collins, but several other members of our staff contribute to the individual programs. So NIEHS has actually been very heavily engaged in the HRHR programs. Over the period of time, we've actually administered several of these for NIH. Prior to 2012, all of the awards were actually administered by the Office of the Director. They weren't administered by individual institutes, but there were always science officers or subject matter experts from the individual institutes that were engaged. And so we were involved with several of the earlier awards through the HRHR program. But since 2012, we've actually continued to be heavily engaged in supporting these, some of these with our own funds, some co-funded with Common Fund, and some using Common Fund specific resources. Just for reference, so you can see on the right-hand side here, the percent of the awards that are given to NAEHS investigators. For reference, NAEHS is about 3%, a little less than 3% of the total NIH budget. So we're fairly well represented. We would like to see these numbers a little bit higher, but our science does come through these fairly well. And we have very purposefully nurtured the awardees that we've had in these programs to really bring them into our fold. And so I'm going to present 3 vignettes of examples here, and then you'll hear some other examples from Carol and Jenny of kind of things that we've done and specific cases of investigators that we found to be very successful through our programs. So the first person I'd like to highlight is Mark Zilka from University of North Carolina. Prior to getting his Pioneer Award, Mark was a very well-established and fairly heavily funded researcher on autism, but all of his funding had come from other institutes. His Pioneer Award was loosely focused on environment, really looking at non-genetic contributors to autism risk. And through the Pioneer Award and some outreach efforts, both from Cindy Lawler and from folks in the NTP, we really were able to draw Mark into our fold, and he is actually one of our River awardees, I think from the second cohort of the River program. Likewise, Manish Arora, who I think many of you know is an innovator in exposure analysis techniques. And he, relatively early on, I'm not even sure he had risen to independent faculty level, received one of the DP2s, the New Innovator Awards, which was also put forward for a P-case, which he received in 2016. And Manish was also one of our River awardees in the second cohort. And then finally, and perhaps our best success to date, Dana Dolonoy, who's at University of Michigan, in charge of the Department of Environmental Health there, was a ONES Awardee and was able to transition the success on her ONES effort into one of the Transformative Research Awards, which is the one HRHR program that is not single investigator specific. So those can be multi-PI projects, unlike the other programs, which can only have a single principal investigator. And Dana was able to take that Transformative Research Award and transition the science there, which was an outreach of her ONES activity, into a River Award in the last cohort, the awards that were made last year. So these opportunities to focus on the individuals has really done a great job of helping us leverage the earlier funding into some really successful and very innovative research activities. So we're going to transition now, and I'm going to stop talking about HRHR, and you'll hear a lot more depth in our thinking on ONES from Dr. Carol Schreffler, and on River from Miss Jenny Collins in my group. So with that, we'll transition over to Carol.
All right. Okay. Thank you. I'm going to talk about the Outstanding in a New Environmental Scientist program. And this program was first announced in 2006. From the very beginning, it was designed as a research grant that is an R01 with the purpose of identifying outstanding scientists at the early stages of their careers and assisting them in establishing innovative research programs. And we also wanted these to have a defined impact on the environmental health sciences. The program was originally designed to address the studies of NIH which showed that early career investigators were both less successful in obtaining their first research grant support, presumably because they were competing with more senior investigators who have a longer record of research accomplishments and more preliminary data, but they were also less successful in the competitive renewal of their first grant. So the research budget, the budget is composed of two elements that were designed to address these hurdles. The first is an R01 research budget, which is to support the project that's described in the application. But most importantly, we designed a career enhancement budget. And this career enhancement budget is to provide resources and experiences which cannot be justified by the research proposal itself, but are designed to enhance the career and provide resources which will enhance the likelihood of success of renewal of the grant. Because this career enhancement budget is a tangible NAEHS investment in the career of the ONES awardee, we also wanted to see a similar institutional investment and commitment to the applicant in the application. So we expected some evidence of a dedicated independent research space and resources, the rank of assistant professor or research assistant professor, and we also require a 50% commitment to this particular research project. We require a letter from the chair of the department where the PI holds the primary appointment or the administrative unit responsible for promotion and tenure, which describes the tangible research support which has been committed. We also only allow one application from each school within a university. So this requires some selection process by the university. The ONES program, unlike other R01 programs, requires the formation of an external advisory committee. And the purpose of this advisory committee is not to necessarily critique the project, but it's meant as part of the backup and career research guidance mechanism for the applicant. It's meant to contribute to the success of the project and particularly to discuss the framework for the renewal of the project. We also found that the ONES program had a lot to contribute to NAEHS as well. These former ONES awardees have gone on to become leaders in research and environmental health sciences, as David said, are now department heads, heads of Superfund programs. They lead T32 programs, and they have other prominent roles, and I'll touch on some of these a little later on. In addition, these applications are assigned to program officers across the division. So the research of the ONES covers all of the scientific portfolios of the NAEHS, and I think this has really contributed to the excellence of the science in all areas. This program, I think, has been instrumental in meeting the NIEHS goals of funding the research of the ESIs, and I'll show you a little bit of the data later. A big part of this ONES program has been the nurturing of the relationships with the NIEHS, and the focus of this has been on the grantee meetings, which have all been held on the NIEHS campus. Of course, the ONES people do present their research. We advertise this to the Division of Intramural and particularly to the DIR postdoctoral community and welcome their participation. It is more than just a grantee meeting. A very popular element has addressed the career enhancement part of the budget. We traditionally invite back past ONES awardees to come in and talk about how they use their ONES career enhancement budget, how they use the advisory committee, things that were really successful, things that really didn't work, and particularly the things that they wish someone had told them when they were in the starting phases of their research grant. We also invite the program officers to have lunch or a question and answer session with the ONES awardees. So the ONES awardees can ask grant-related questions. and most particularly to put a face on the program officers so they can feel that they really kind of know them and can talk to them about any kinds of questions. We have the review officers participate so they can be asked review-related questions. The review officers are also encouraged to invite ONES awardees to participate in study sections and review panels so they can get that kind of experience as well. So all of this, I think, has created a sense of community, which I believe really has strengthened the affiliation of the ONES awardees with our institute. So this is a bit of the timeline. We first presented the concept clearance to council in May 2005, and this was approved. Between 2005 and 2010, we released announcements yearly, and during this time, we supported 6 cohorts of ONES awardees, with the last in 2011. Between 2011 and 2014, there was a program hiatus and there were no new announcements, but in May 2013, the concept renewal was approved, and between 2013 and 2018, there were 4 additional funding opportunities announcements released. During this time, we became possible to have multiple submission dates. So 2 of these announcements were for 3 years of receipt dates. And so we supported 6 additional cohorts of ONES awardees. And this now brings us to September 2020, when we're requesting concept renewal approval again from the council. So the program analysis branch has been gathering some data on the ONES program, and I want to thank Steve Tuashimi for putting in all of the work to put all of this together. This first table shows the awards data for the ONES program through the 2020 awards we made this spring. The first year we had a very large number of applications and made 8 awards. After that, we made between 6 and 8 awards during the years 2006 and 2011. As I said, there was a hiatus in the program between 2011 and 2014. Then we reissued the program, and at this time it had a larger permissible budget per grant. And this was done to accommodate epidemiologic studies, which of course tend to have higher costs for active recruitment and follow-up. We did increase the total set-aside devoted to the program per year slightly, but the numbers of applications funded did drop to 5 or 6 because of the higher cost of the application. So the graph on the map on the right displays the locations of the ONES awardees. And the larger the circle, the more awards were made to that particular geographical area. Don't pay any attention to the different colors, because these are just were made to make the graph more legible, and they don't have any really significance. So remember that we limit applications to 1 submission per school within a university. So one of our goals was to have good geographical spread of the awards and to increase the visibility of the program. I think we've achieved that goal. And since also universities tend to have particular strengths in certain disciplinary areas, I like to think this diversity of geographical representation has led to a larger spread of scientific problems that are being addressed by the awardees. Next are some of the program statistics. We've had 548 competing ONES applications, and so far have made 75 awards, and this is a success rate of about 14%. Over 75% of the recipients have been promoted to tenure. This is based on data on awardees through 2018. So I think this is really remarkable since some of these latter ONES awardees are not yet really even at that decision point for tenure. So looking at the data from the classes between 2006 and 2018, 45% of these PIs have received awards from other NIH since they received their ONES award. However, remarkably, 69% of the ONES awardees have either successfully renewed their ONES award or obtained other EHS support. And this includes a 46% success rate for those who submitted renewal applications. So I think this meets one of our goals for the ONES Award program. In addition, there have been over 1,500 publications to date, which have cited the ONES grant numbers. We looked at the ONES research focus areas, and this is on the graph on the right. So I think we were successful in contributing to scientific areas across the NIEHS portfolio. It also shows how many applications, successful applications were in epidemiology in orange versus basic science in blue. So the largest number of successful applications focus on the nervous system, followed by respiratory focused applications and then genome integrity. And when you think about it, this seems logical since the nervous system is such a frequent target of environmental agents. And we really do have a very large, sizable portfolio in air pollution. So we do get a lot of respiratory grants. We've traditionally had a very strong group of investigators in DNA repair and other areas of genome integrity. So it is likely that new investigators in this area would be attracted to NIEHS. But after that, the applications are spread very broadly across the topics. And this, I believe, supports our goal of enriching scientific areas across the scientific portfolio. Next are some, what I find are very impressive bibliometric figures. There were 1,569 publications which cited a ONES grant. These have been published in 487 different journals. The top journal is Toxicologic Sciences with 60 articles, followed by Environmental Health Perspectives with 58 articles, and PLOS1 with 54. 914 of these publications have a relative citation ranking of over 1. This ranking is a ranking which takes into account the number of times the article has been cited when it is normalized for the discipline of the article. So an RCR value of 1 is at the median for all NIH R01 funded articles for that year. So our ONES have a median of about 1.4. That means they've been cited about 1.4 times greater than the median of all NIH R01 articles. And we have a mean of about 2.2, and there was one RCR for a paper which was at 63.3. So this was a really remarkable paper. In addition, 459 of these publications have an RCR value of greater than the 75th percentile. And we note that some of these newer articles may not even have an RCR yet. So 2 of our goals on the ONES program are increasing the number of awards given to early stage investigators and, of course, to attract talented new investigators to EHS research. This graph shows the number of ESI investigators funded by NIEHS each year since 2010, when the ESI designation was started. So the number of ESI investigators funded whose grants were unsolicited R01s is shown in green. The number of ONES grants is shown in red. And we've also had a varying number of ESI awards among our solicited funding opportunity announcements, and these are shown in orange. So as you can see, we normally fund about 14 to 18 early stage investigators per per year. And as you can see also, for most years, around 30 to 40% of the ESIs funded by NAEHS have been as a result of the ONES program. There's a lot of variability due to the number of appeals of the special funding opportunity announcements in orange, and so that's why I showed them differently. One of the most interesting observations is during the 3-year period when we had a hiatus in the ONES program, and the number of ESIs funded through the unsolicited R01 category did not increase to compensate for the loss of the ONES opportunity. And in 2 of those 3 years, it was really a remarkable drop since the number of ESIs funded was below 10 per year for those 2 years. The program analysis branch also evaluated the program by looking at various outcome measures of later career success by comparing 2 groups of applicants. The first was the ONES group, which was composed of the 3 applicants who were closest to the priority score cutoff, and the other group was composed of the 3 applicants who had the best priority scores of those who were not funded. So this study included the first 11 years of the program, and there were 33 individuals in each group. One interesting comparison is where the ONES versus the comparison group get their subsequent funding. The numbers, the colors on the graph indicate which of the many grant mechanisms were used in the funding search. But the graph on the left shows the applications which were awarded by NAEHS. So as you can see, the sample ONES group had approximately 2.5 times the number of funded grants from NAEHS than did the comparison group. On the right, the graph shows the applications awarded by the other ICs. So the ONES group awardees do get grants from other institutes, but the group that did not get the ONES grant appears to go to other institutes for their funding. So this, I believe, indicates that the ONES program really has been successful in attracting and keeping productive investigators in the environmental health sciences research. Since this is a people-focused program, and I wanted to just really go through and highlight some of the awardees as kind of a closer look of where they are now, instead of picking stars and awardees from various years, I decided to focus on the first group of 8 awardees. So where are they now? So their picture from that time is on the right-hand side. The 6 awardees from left to right are Gökhan Mutlu, who was at Northwestern and is now at the University of Chicago. Stefania Cormier, who was at Louisiana State University. Patricia Presco at Pittsburgh. Sven Jort, who was at Yale and is now at Duke. Michael Borchers at the University of Cincinnati. Donna Zhang at the University of Arizona. Michelle Bell at Yale, and Thomas Begley at the State University of New York. All 8 are still in academia. All 8 have tenured positions. 6 are at the full professor level. Remarkably, in this time, all 8 have current NIH grant funding, and for 6 of these individuals, their funding is from NIEHS. So this table shows the subsequent grant support for this first group of ONES awardee. So you can see that by a large majority, their subsequent grant support was from NIEHS, and they've had 42 additional grants from NIEHS, with a smattering from NHLBI, CA, and others. 2 of this class of ONES have been awarded river grants, and that you'll be hearing about next. Dr. Opresco has developed a highly innovative tool which uses light and small molecule probes to selectively cause DNA lesions at telomeres. And Dr. Zhang has a research project that characterizes the molecular basis of diseases associated with arsenic exposure. 3 others have R01s from NIEHS, and I wanted to talk about Dr. Mutlu. Dr. Mutlu is an example of how the ONES awardee can really make a difference in a research career. Dr. Mutlu is a physician scientist, and at the time he applied for the ONES, he was struggling to get time away from his clinical duties to engage in research. He's a pulmonary care physician, so the logical course would have been to apply to NHLBI. However, he was interested in mechanisms of thrombosis, and he decided to apply for the ONES Award. It was awarded. His ONES grant is still active and is scheduled to be funded through 2023. He's a member of the NIHS funded center in Chicago and has other NIH funding that I'll mention in a moment. Dr. Begley currently has 2 grants, or 2 R01s from NIEHS, and they're both focused on methylation in the DNA damage response. Dr. Jort has 1 R01 from NIEHS. Dr. Jort was a neuroscientist, and he was really looking at sensory neurons and decided to look at their focus on their response to environmental irritants, and so has moved his career in that direction. 3 of the ONES awardees are PIs of large programs supported by NIHS. Dr. Stefania Corme is the principal investigator of the LSU Superfund program. Dr. Jort is the principal investigator of an NIEHS cooperative agreement that's part of the countermeasures against chemical threats. And Dr. Mutlu is the PI of one of the target grants. As I said, 5 of this group have grants from other NIH institutes, including Michelle Bell and Dr. Borchers, who are still in related areas to NIEHS, particularly Dr. Bell, who's interested in focusing on minority health disparities and exposure outcomes. So, with all of this in mind, NIEHS is recommending continuing the ONES program without significant changes, but we're always interested in having any recommendations for things that you feel can improve the program. We do evaluate the program every couple of years, as you can see, but as I showed you, I feel this program is performing up to its expectations. We're constantly looking at other NIH ESI programs and approaches to see if the ONES is still the right fit for NIHS. And of course, we're always constantly looking at other ways and newer ways to increase diversity in the grant programs and broaden our outreach. Again, we're trying to explore opportunities for NIEH ONES awardees to interact more frequently. Our grantee meetings are now in person every other year basis. We've always had more requests for networking time, and we're hoping that some of the new virtual meeting formats will allow going back to a yearly meeting or other kinds of activities. So going forward for discussion, just a couple of things that I thought about for discussion. We're always looking for optimal ways to support the career development and the career enhancement budget. The external advisory committee, should these continue to be required? Are they useful? Most early stage investigator programs do not have these. So other kinds of career development discussions, what kinds of interactions at grantee meetings do you think would be useful? And again, we're always looking for things like changes in the application, you know, are there things that should be in it that make it more user-friendly to reviewers, that would come up, instructions to reviewers that would help. Again, outreach, diversity, how should be done, and any other things that you think would be useful. So our council reviewers are Drs. Kavanaugh, Rosette, and Sung, and I will give the chair to them. Hello.
Thank you, Carol. That was really wonderful. This is Terry Kavanaugh talking. I guess I can take the lead, and Brad and Pat, please chime in as you feel you'd like to. We had a meeting about this program to talk about the various aspects of it and where we thought it was successful and maybe some minor tweaks to make it even more successful. We find this program to be an exceptionally good program for the Institute, and it's especially good at fostering the careers of outstanding investigators as they move into either stay in or move into environmental health sciences. While the program has been very successful, as you saw from the slides, there was interest in seeing if we could get the applications, more applications from physician scientists, and especially those that might be doing epidemiological and or clinical research. Some of the, and Brad, I presume, will have more to say about that. We did feel that the statistics for the program were clear that this is a very successful program and we're highly supportive of it. Some of the things that we felt could also be addressed were that the training mentoring aspects of the program are exceptionally valuable, and we would like to see whether or not the rest of the council have any other suggestions about how to increase the oversight, if you will, of the trainees. But we felt that this was a very successful program. One thing that we also talked a little bit about was taking advantage of intramural, extramural collaborations at NAEHS, and especially for those physician scientists who may be interested in collaborating with work going on at the clinical center, and also other clinically oriented environmental health activities such as the PESHUs, that's the pediatric environmental health specialty units that are around the country. Brad?
Thanks, Terry. You summarized some of the comments that we made yesterday very nicely. I think that, you know, that as Carol outlined, this program has a impressive success rate by almost every metric. And I particularly like the required 50% effort on the grant and the recognition that even an early stage R01 recipient needs mentoring. So it's not like we're not abandoning these awardees after their K is done. So I think that those are real strengths and something that we would benefit from in even an independent R01 for early stage investigator R01s. So I just want to reiterate the comments that Terry made. I think that a very small percent of these grants in general are human or epi grants, relatively underrepresented physician scientists. And one of your examples, Carol, was particularly notable because you take a pulmonologist who's on the cusp of having to switch to more clinical duties. You know, that's a very profitable clinical practice, and once that person switches over, they're unlikely to come back. So I think that the importance of bringing in a physician scientist early in their career before the clinical duties take over, I think is incredibly important. And I think that in addition to the balance between foundational environmental health science and human research, I think we also have to think about a balance between adult and child. And I don't know that we described that, but I think we should always be aware of the need to have to try to balance the portfolio between adult and children. And my final comment, and a lot of these comments really relate to the River program as well, is having served on some of these review panels, there are a paucity of human grants, and you know, I find that I or colleagues with my expertise will be only able to review one or two grants, and the majority of the people in the room are PhD scientists or people doing foundational neuroscience. And what that means is that the majority of the room is going to be less interested in that grant that involves human research that has direct impact on human health potentially. And so it sort of biases against those grants in the review process. And I think this holds true for both mechanisms that we'll discuss. So I think those are just the concerns I have. I think the program is fantastic. I would just love to see continued efforts to diversification of the portfolio.
Dr. Sung, I believe you're up.
Oh, yes. Thank you so much for such a really succinct yet really just filled with useful information type of a presentation. I wish I could do it like you guys, but nonetheless, you get paid the big bucks to do what you do. But, I really like the program. I think the interactions with program staff, from people who actually administer grants, advising grantees, as well as people who are actually involved in running the review panels, the significance of that cannot be overstated, because I do a lot of mentoring in my former institution and also currently. I serve as the Associate Dean for Research here, UT Health San Antonio. And I see a lot of junior faculty not quite know how the NIH works. They couldn't tell the difference between the study section, a review panel, and the institute. So having this type of personal interaction is really a fantastic idea. I don't know how you could apply that to more generally to the people who aren't coming in through the ONES program. The ONES program obviously has been very successful. I like the name to begin with. Two wouldn't be good, so ONES is great, I think. And all the statistics and so on point to, continuing success. A shame that they had to go in a hiatus for a while for probably money reason or some other reason that I'm not privy to. I do share my colleagues' concern about the lack of human studies. I'm a basic scientist, but I do see the value of that. So I think if you can think of creative ways to set aside some of the money, because for the ONES program, obviously a candidate would have to be nominated by his or her own institution. There could be some inherent bias there right at the beginning. So unless we think creatively and set aside maybe a pot of money, I don't know how appropriate that would be. It may be hard to correct, the current trend of having most of the people focusing on pathways and mechanistic biology, and very few people being successful in getting a human study funded through this particular mechanism. So it's something that we need to think about, and I agree with my colleagues. But as I point out, even though I'm a basic, biologist, I do see the importance of paying some attention in that particular regard. It's a great program. It should continue. I mean, what can I say? Some of the graduates have gone on to getting bigger, awards, including the River Award. So obviously, the program is doing something great, as well as the candidates who get all these awards. They take my hats off to many of them. I will stop there.
We have a couple of comments. Dr. Hertz-Pichotti, you put a question in the chat box. How does the promotion of epidemiologists ONES awards compare with the proportion among the ONES applications? Carol, did you want to try to address that, or?
Yeah, I looked at this yesterday, and actually the ONES awardees, if about 20% of the, I remember about 20% of the awards for the ONES were epidemiology grants. And of course, this has increased quite a bit since we upped the budget allocation. So most of those awards were made, since we re-announced it. And I haven't looked to see about whether or not that is kind of in proportion to the number of applications we get from epidemiology. There is not exactly, to answer Brad's question, a one-to-one ratio, because many of the epidemiologists are PhDs, and many of the people who were MDs, at least their research project was more of a basic project, was, you know, an animal study, and it wasn't necessarily a human study, or it may have had a human part of it plus an animal study. So to say that the epidemiologists were MDs is not really, you know, it's not really a mapping that's appropriate. We've been getting, I think, a lot more epidemiology grants within the last couple of years after we upped the budget. There were a couple of little things that came in, and I didn't show this because it was only for 1 year's data on the review. There was a 1 year when some of the review, the review brought in a person to look at this kind of question. And as one might expect, just like within the regular grants, the people who are at the latter years of their early stage investigator status tend to be more successful than those who are earlier in their, you know, like in the first, second, third year. And so there was a little bit of a hint that maybe some of the epidemiology grants tended to also be from people who are earlier in their career. And, you know, so there are all sorts of factors that go into this, as well as just the idea that they're in different disciplines.
In the end, we have a couple more questions. In the interest of time, we'll just take these two because we still have to talk about the river program. So Jose, you were next up, so I'll let you ask your question.
Yes, thank you, Pat. And this is really a very, very successful program. And I think the example of the first cohort just offers great evidence of the long-term success. And I'm also very, very glad that there's a desire to increase diversity. And I wonder if you could talk about diversity beyond gender or clinical duties, or whether it's epidemiology or basic science, and talk a little bit about the racial and ethnic diversity in the program. I see that you also look at advertising and outreach as ways to try to increase diversity, but what do we know about what are the enhancers and barriers for candidates to be successful, especially from racial and ethnic diversity?
Well, the first thing, we don't have any data on the applicants when they come in, because anything that is submitted to NIH about racial or diversity information is stripped before we get it. So I can't talk about the applicant pool, and I have no way of knowing. And of course, I don't know. I know that we have had a number of Hispanic, Latino ONES awardees, including one that was in the last round over the years. And I only know that because they've essentially told me, you know, that, and so, I mean, there are Hispanics are represented. Otherwise, I have no way of really knowing what the pool looks like or the applicant pool looks like, except for these individuals who have told me they're either from, well, one was from last year was from Costa Rica, and he talked about that being from Costa Rica, and then another one was from South America, and then of course he talked about being from South America. So those are, you know.
So we have Marla. It looks like you took your hand down. We had a couple of other related questions in the chat. Again, in the interest of time, hopefully we can carry this discussion into the broader discussion tomorrow afternoon. But in the interest of time, I'm going to ask Jenny to go ahead and give her presentation on the river program. And then, like I said, we can have more discussion maybe tomorrow afternoon on this topic. Jenny, take it away.
In control here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Jenny Collins, and I'm a health specialist in the Exposure, Response, and Technology branch in DERT. And I'm also the program coordinator for the other program that's focused on people rather than projects, the Revolutionizing Innovative Visionary Environmental Health Research, or RIVER program. So the RIVER program represents the NAEHS implementation of the R35 mechanism. So I'll take just a few brief minutes, not even minutes, to talk about the mechanism itself. And then we'll talk about RIVER, where I'll give you a history, a program update, and our plans for future implementation. So the R35 mechanism is currently being piloted by the NIH, and the purpose is to provide long-term support to experienced investigators who have an outstanding record of productivity. And by the way that the mechanism is designed, it's intended to encourage investigators to embark on long-term projects of unusual potential. There are 7 institutes that are currently participating in this pilot, and I have them ordered here on the right by when each of them started their program. During this pilot phase, NIH has granted the individual institutes flexibility in adapting the R35 mechanism to their individual mission and priorities within the guidelines that I have here for you on the screen. And each of the institutes that has released an R35 program has done so in a distinct way within these guidelines. So the pilot program was introduced to our council in September 2014 as part of the DERT Director's Report. And then in May 2016, we obtained concept clearance for our R35 program. Since then, we've released RFAs on a roughly annual basis, and we have funded 3 cohorts of awardees. So the goal of our R35 program is to identify individuals from our grantee community who demonstrate a broad vision and the potential for continuing their impactful research, particularly using the flexibility and sustained support that is allowed by this mechanism. So the RIVER is not necessarily career stage specific, because we recognize that innovative ideas and transformative research can result from researchers really at any stage of their careers. And we also feel like all areas of our portfolio can benefit from the mechanism. So since the very beginning, the RIVER program has been overseen by a trans-divisional team in DERT that's comprised of members from grants management, scientific review, and the program branches. And this group is tasked with maintaining the scheme for review, management, and evaluation. So prior to issuing each of the RFAs, this team meets to deliberate and discuss all those main parameters and guidelines that I showed you earlier. And then we make any changes that are needed based on what we learned from the previous round. So an R35 is really different from an R01. Awardees are given freedom and flexibility and more time and money, which we hope will enable them to push their research in new directions, resulting in greater impacts. And RIVER is intended to support the majority of the research program for that individual, so they have to agree to the consolidation of all their individual investigator-initiated research into the R35. They can't submit any unsolicited individual investigator-initiated applications to us until that last year of their R35. And throughout the R35, they have to commit to a minimum of 6 person months. Our program has been evolving over time, and this evolution has been guided by the DERT team that I just told you about. Perhaps the largest change that we made along the way was to allow applicants to ask for up to $600K direct cost, even if the grants to be consolidated do not total to that amount. And we did this to attract investigators whose science has inherently higher costs. So those would be epidemiologic studies or studies that involve especially expensive methodology. In addition, in the more recent years, we reduced the set aside down to 4 million. And then very early on, we just tweaked the eligibility criteria just a bit to make it less restrictive and confusing for the applicants. So I told you that we hope to attract applicants from all career stages, and we've definitely been successful in doing that. And though their success rate is not as high as more established investigators, I'm happy to say that 21% of our current awardees were actually within 10 years of their first R01 when they received their R35. We've received applications representing a diverse array of scientific focus areas, and the grants that we funded include research spanning a range of disciplines, including genome stability, exposure biology, xenobiotic metabolism, mitochondrial dysfunction, and epigenetics, multiple exposures and diseases, including liver disease, autism, Parkinson's disease, lupus, and cancer. So I'm displaying the information here by primary science code, which is mutually exclusive. So there are some projects and applications that are actually relevant to multiple areas. We do, however, have an emphasis in some of the areas, both in terms of applications and awards, and some areas are underrepresented, particularly epidemiology, like ONES. I wish I had time to tell you about every single project that we funded, and I don't. We funded 19 awards to date. I've kind of loosely put them into 4 bins here, although some may have relevance to multiple. I would encourage you at the bottom of each of these slides, there's a link that will take you to our webpage where you can read a short summary of the projects as well as link out to NIH Reporter. I'm also indicating by the color around each one which year the awardee was funded. So the first group of awardees is looking at DNA's role in health and disease. Carol told you already about Patricia Presco, who's a former onesie. So I'll tell you about Joanne Sweezy. Dr. Sweezy is focused on providing mechanistic insights into the development of lupus as a result of gene-environment interactions. She's combining knowledge that she's gained from her previous research and plans to construct mouse models with abnormal DNA repair genes like those found in people with lupus. These innovative models will allow her to study how genetic predisposition and environmental exposures together contribute to lupus with the ultimate goal of improving disease treatment. Other of our investigators are looking at interactions between the environment and proteins and pathways. Dr. Tu is studying the role of dynamin-related protein 1 in Parkinson's disease based on his recent discovery of a new function for the protein. Tu is researching the protein's role in neurotoxicity by looking at brain cell interactions and will also explore its role in toxicity after exposure to manganese or pesticides, both alone and in combination with gut bacteria. This next group are linking exposures and disease. Brandon Pierce, who's also actually a former ONES awardee, is using epidemiological methods to study how people's genetic differences affect their body's response to food and water contaminated by arsenic, and how the human genome is affected by this exposure. Pierce hopes to identify people who are most susceptible to harm from arsenic so that they can take actions and reduce their exposure. This last group is developing tools and technology, so I'll tell you what Ben Van Houten's doing. He was funded very recently, and his project will develop and validate new genomic tools and use several high-resolution fluorescent approaches, including single particle tracking protocols, to watch individual repair genes or repair proteins arrive and process damaged sites in real time in living cells. So even though our program is still very new with our first group of awardees not even halfway through their River Award, I would like to shift now to talk to you about how the awardees are doing. Here I'm using the NIH developed eyesight tool, which provides a panel of bibliometric information for scientific publications within a defined group. So in this case, I'm using all the publications to date that cite NIEHS R35 grants. And as you can see, as of August, there's already 123 publications, 112 of which are research articles that have been cited almost 500 times. I'm also sharing, like Carol did, some information on the relative citation ratio for the 41 publications that are, I guess, old enough, even though they're not old at all, to have this value assigned. So you can see the median RCR is 1.87 and the mean is 2.23. And this tells us that our River grantees are already generating influential publications. These are also from the eyesight tool, and they're from the translation module. And this module provides a panel of information summarizing the actual content of the journal articles. So in this case, I'm just looking at the research articles that have been published, and they've been assigned scores in 3 categories: human, animal, and molecular and cellular biology. And this is based on the number of mesh terms that they have that fall into each of these categories. So the articles are plotted in these tripartite graphs, where human-oriented research is closest to the top of the triangle, animal closest to the bottom right, and molecular cellular to the bottom left. So if it doesn't have any mesh terms, it falls below the triangle. So we had 7 articles that you can see in that dot below the triangle. Right now, I'm really just using this module to show you where most of the publications to date are concentrated. And given that the projects we funded for so far, are especially early in the program, are more mechanistically focused, it's not surprising that the emphasis is more towards that bottom left corner. That said, the hope is that these projects will evolve through the different phases of the environmental health translational research process. So these will be really interesting to look at both at the program level and at the individual grantee level after a few more years have passed to see if we are, moving more towards the top of these triangles. As this research leads to things like novel therapeutic targets or strategies and approaches to protect human health, informs policy, or enables population-wide intervention or prevention efforts. So I've also been working with my colleague in the program analysis branch to look at ways to evaluate this program, because as I've told you, this is really different than a traditional R01. So in addition to asking our awardees to tell us about the research that they've been doing, we're also asking them specifically to tell us how they're using the mechanism. So we've been asking them two things: to tell us about new research ideas that they've been able to pursue as they've arisen during a particular reporting period, as well as any additional and expanded activities that they've been able to pursue that they just wouldn't have been able to do without the mechanism. And thankfully, they're all telling us these things, and they're showing us that they're making the most out of this mechanism. We're seeing evidence of increased reach and visibility of environmental health sciences research through things such as more time to submit manuscripts to journals with high visibility, because they don't have to hurry and get the paper out in time for the next R01. We see lots of evidence of new and increased collaborations and interdisciplinary relationships being formed. And we're excited to do some more sophisticated analyses down the road to look at things like collaborative networks. We're also seeing increased evidence of scientific service, in particular evidence of increased mentorship, with several of our awardees noting that the students that they're supervising are at record highs, and also standing study section service, either increased or new service. The other thing, and this is pretty hard for us to actually measure, but we're seeing that based on this, they're using this increased flexibility to improve their creativity. I just picked a few quotes from their notes, and you can see lots of, as this, the third bullet points out, spin-offs. And of course, they're within the overall scope of the project. And they just feel better situated to follow the project where it leads. And the other thing is, these progress reports are really enjoyable to read. There is so much excitement on the part of the investigators. Before we move on to talk about our plans for the future, I think it is important to talk about, since this was a new mechanism for us, the vision that we had in 2016 and the reality that we've experienced along the way. So I just finished telling you about how the grantees are enjoying this reduced administrative burden because they aren't managing multiple applications and writing multiple grants. We also hoped back in 2016 that our staff would also enjoy a reduction in administrative burden due to grant consolidation. But the reality is most of our awardees have only one grant that's eligible for consolidation. They may have other grants, but they might be multi-PI grants or grants that came out of an RFA. In a similar vein, we thought that River would be largely budget neutral due to that consolidation, and especially after we allowed them to ask for up to $600K. This is turning out not to be the case. And of course, I've painted this picture of this glorious program, so we thought if we build it, they will come. And actually, on average, only about 16% of eligible NAEHS grantees actually apply for an R35. And we hope that River would benefit all areas of our portfolio. And as I showed you before, there are some areas where we have limited applications and limited success. With all this in mind, we would very much like to continue River and do it in the way that we have been, being overseen by the STIRT Trans-Divisional Program Team, where we're allowed to regularly assess and adjust the program parameters, of course, operating within the NIH guidelines. We'll continue to monitor the progress of the existing R35 grants, paying that special attention to the features of the R35 that are unique. And we're really excited to expand these analyses as the program matures. We'll continue to maintain an inventory of all the other NIH R35 programs, which we've been doing all along. And at this point, we'd really like to re-engage with program coordinators from across the NIH to talk about any changes they've been making along the way, and also to discuss ideas for the best way to analyze the success of these types of programs. And then explore ways to bring together and connect current R35 awardees with ONES awardees, which Carol mentioned that briefly. We actually had during our July remote meeting that we held with the ONES awardees, Dr. Apresco was our keynote speaker, and her talk was extremely well received. So we'd like to find other ways to connect those two groups. So I have some points here for discussion. These are things that the internal team has been discussing on a regular basis. One thing in particular, one switch in particular we're considering making is adjusting the solicitation frequency from an basically every year RFA to an every other year. And this would, we're thinking of doing this for a couple of reasons. One, cost of the program. Two, we could potentially increase interest in the program if it's every other year. And also maybe we could reduce some of that burden for our staff by doing so. We're also interested in any thoughts that you have on the other features, including the eligibility, the budget, of course, attracting a wider variety of science, especially epidemiology, as well as brand new applicants to R35, and any ideas you have on assessing progress. So we'll start with the same council reviewers, Drs. Kavanaugh, Reset, and Sung.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. That was, again, a very nice presentation. And as with the ONES program, we all agree that this is a very important program for the Institute and a very successful program, at least for the data that you have so far. Very impressive, actually. We feel that it's really one of the best things about the program and the flexibility that it has is that it really helps investigators to keep current in advanced technologies, for instance, and for taking risks. So one of the things that we might talk about as a council is in a sort of a frank discussion, how many of the investigators who have taken risks would admit to going down blind alleys or not having success. That's part of course, the idea of high risk, high reward types of programs, but it would be interesting to get that kind of data. We also agree that increasing the role of epidemiology for human or translation or population studies would be a great goal for the Institute to try and increase this area. And one of the things we talked about was perhaps encouraging people to take advantage of ancillary studies to ongoing clinical research trials or other such populations that might be outside their institute, for instance, but through collaboration, they might find those programs. It is important to point out that even though you have to consolidate with this, it doesn't prevent investigators from applying for other RFAs from the Institute or from getting funding from other institutes that can also be brought into as a collaborative program for their River Award. And it wasn't clear, at least to me, that that's something that would also be encouraged by the Institute. Otherwise, I think that this is a wonderful program and has been so far immensely successful. One other thing regarding the every other year approach, we also talked about how important it would be to make sure that those people who are eligible don't drop off. Because for the first year they'd be eligible, but if it were put off for another year, they might fall off eligibility. But to inform them that they still would be eligible because of the every other year announcement. Brad or Pat, do you want to chime in?
Happy to go next. So I don't want to be a broken record, so I do want to make a few points about this. So first of all, I think that this is a brilliant program. I really love the concept. I love the flexibility. I think it's where we need to be in research wherever possible. I think that this concept has the chance to really advance the science. I think it's very important that this creates an opportunity for mentorship and that may not be as, where the traditional grant mechanisms may not be as amenable to that. Service has been, the advantage to encouraging service has been noted by some of those funded and I think is really a strength as well. So I think that sort of one of my just general comments that I've made in many councils previously and even today is that I think we really need NAEHS to continue to try to bring our research closer to to disease states or to what people understand. I think that when our research is clearly translatable to human health, people notice that it raises the stature of the institute, and in particular when you leverage the impact that our research can have on disease, you rally the people with the disease to the institute, and it makes us stronger. The people funded are outstanding. There's no question about it. These are outstanding people, but even the people that you raise, that you identify as working in a specific disease state, are really working in foundational environmental health research. So, and I will reiterate what I said earlier. I think that this mechanism is particularly difficult for research involving humans, because it's very difficult in population-based studies to put together a grant that is so flexible. It's almost inherently biased against those kinds of grants. And so I actually would go one step further than what Terry's comments were, and say I think this argues that we almost need to carve out a portion of this for human grants, so that the review process is really can sort of separate it from the review process of a foundational neuroscience, of a foundational environmental health sciences grant. I think it would probably do a service to our grantees to provide that level of separation, because I think that there's some important work that may be missed otherwise. So I'll leave it at that and let Patrick comment.
Okay, thank you. You stole all my points. I do agree. I do agree that we have a responsibility to see to it that the more translational work gets recognized. Maybe earmarking some of the funds is the way to go. I don't know about the detailed logistics, how you decide, how you earmark and so on, but it's something that we ought to consider. It's just a fantastic idea to have the I-35 or equivalent mechanism. All our veterans who write R1s in the past and so on know that the last 2 months of an R1 submission is hell, in the sense that you have to worry about preliminary data. All the students and postdocs are instructed of pressure, okay, to generate preliminary data to support the experiments that you propose. I frankly think at times that's a waste of resources, because those preliminary data may not even be used in publications and so on. I think judging people's impact in terms of the track record and so on, just a fantastic idea. I would not keep on hammering on the same points. So I just want to end by saying that this is a new program, so documenting success, in addition to like all the normal criteria that you use, impact factor journals, how many times the publications cited. You could also look into like how many times these research publications are written up by others, cited in important reviews and so on. You could work with the grantees in this particular regard, because they pay attention to that, okay? Maybe at times it's a bit more difficult for us who are actually not involved in the work to be tracing down how many times the papers have been featured in another article in another journal, that sort of thing. I'll stop there, but it's a good program. The early indications are that it will be successful. So I think we ought to support it. But paying attention to more translational work, perhaps by earmarking some of the money, is very valid and very legitimate, something that we need to think about. I will stop.
Okay, thank you, Jenny and reviewers. Again, in the interest of time, let's take a couple of questions. I had a chat room question, again, from Dr. Hertz-Pichotto. Says, eligibility is the issue. Are epidemiologists more likely to use the multi-PI mechanism for the R01s? What is the obstacle to opening up the R35 to those PIs with R01s using the MPI route?
Yeah, thank you for this question. This actually comes up a lot. It comes up in questions from applicants, and it comes up in actually reviewers always note this. There's actually a fair number of our I guess the pool of all potential applicants who only have multi-PI grants. Some of the EPI people do have both types, so there are some that just aren't applying as well. But there is a large portion of people, there's very little overlap between the people that have the single PI grants and the multi-PI. We did look at this. There's a couple of issues there. One, this is about a person, not a project. So our team internally has struggled with what to do about that. There's also the issue of what to do about consolidation then. So the single PI grants are consolidated into this, but then if you have multi-PI grants, that could be an issue. But that is one reason we suspect that some of the EPI grants are not coming in, because they're not eligible due to that. That's true. But we are deliberating internally. Is there something that we can do for that? We've even tossed around a name, the Outstanding Collaborator. It's ORCA Research Award, the Outstanding Collaborator Research Award that we've been toying with a little bit internally. We just haven't quite worked out all the features of that.
Lynn, did you have a question?
Just a comment. Thank you very much. I just very much agree with all of the reviewers' comments about this, and I love Irv's idea of trying to explore ways to have multi-collaborator grants, if you're going to call them ORCAs, Jennifer, whatever you call them. But I really think that the data that you present are very encouraging in terms of an opportunity perhaps over time to expand the use of this river mechanism. It really does address a lot of the concerns many of us have had about the entire R01 process. As Dr. Sung said, not only in the preparation of those grants and a lot of waste that's involved in that, but also how they're reviewed and just the micro level review of what the investigators are doing, the lack of freedom that I think, really outstanding science is done with more freedom than what you have within that mechanism. So I really would hope to see that the NIEHS will find ways to expand on this concept, or perhaps even the NIH could take a look at whether this concept could be used to also generate just outstanding team science. So this is an individual investigator process, but to be honest, the P mechanisms suffer from some of the same problems as the R mechanisms in terms of the kind of science that it generates, the process of developing those proposals, the way they're reviewed, and to think about that as something that even could be brought forth to NIH for consideration. Anyway. Thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Okay, and thanks everyone for your comments and questions. We do have to do some business now. We have to vote on whether to accept these concepts or to approve these concepts. We'll do them individually, so I will start off with asking for a motion to approve the ONES concept. Can I have such a motion?
Move.
Second?
Second.
Any discussions? All right, I will ask you to go into your electronic council book and register your vote. And Liz, if you would let me know when we have our votes, we'll move on to the second part. I will also mention that there have been a number of comments added to the chat, which I think are very valuable. So I recommend that you all go on and go onto the chat room and read through other people's thoughts. Liz, how are we doing?
Dr. Kaufmacher, Dr. Parker, and Dr. Sung. Please vote.
Parker, Sung, and Kaufmacher. This is for the ONES.
Yes.
concept. Katrina, are we good?
Yeah.
All right, terrific. Okay, now we need to vote on the River Award. So I will entertain a motion to approve that.
I motion to approve.
Okay, second?
Second.
Thank you. If you would all please go in and register votes on the ECB, we'll bring this to a close.
Dr. Sung, please vote.
I thought I did. I wasn't picking it up. I'm double dipping.
Vote early and vote often, as they say. Right? Yeah.
And also mail in your ballot.
That's an idea.
We're good.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I want to thank David and Jenny and Carol for their presentations and for all the council members for their discussion. This closes this part of the action. We're going to take a break now. We're running behind about 16 minutes. That's fine. I didn't want to limit the discussion because this is such an important topic. So we'll take a break and try to get back here around 12:45 Eastern time. For those who are on the East Coast, don't want to eat, grab some lunch and bring it. And we'll reconvene with Rick's report at about at 12:45. Thanks.